Welcome to Shadow of the Cast, a Marvel Champions podcast. I'm Villain Theory, and I'm here with Nelson. Nelson, what are we talking about today?
The best aspect of all time. We are talking about the green aspect of Marvel Champions, protection. I said that very weird. Protection. I don't know why that was a weird emphasis. But yes, we're talking about protection today. I'm very excited because this is my favorite aspect, and I think it's your favorite aspect now, too, if that's correct, right?
Well, the way you said that, I thought you were saying pool, which ripped off the joke from the last episode of mine. But protection has gone up a lot in my estimation. My most recent YouTube video at the time of recording, I did a video on ranking the heroes in fun, which is something I'd never done overall before. And as I went through it, I was like, oh, one of my favorite decks is with this character. And I'm like, it's a protection deck. Oh, no. Then it came up again. And I was like, one of my favorite decks. Oh, wait a second. And I think that every time I mentioned it, it was a protection deck. So I'm very reluctant to say protection is my favorite aspect. But some of my favorite decks, maybe the majority of my favorite decks, are protection. So it peaks very high. I will admit it.
High highs and higher lows. Wait, no, that
something like that.
But yeah, no, and I think we're gonna get into that during this episode and talking about. There's a lot of different ways to play protection, and I think we'll talk about that, but. I think, the question that everyone is asking is protection the best or worst aspect? I don't know if there's a medium argument to be made. I think a lot of people have it as their least or most favorites. And I think that's kind of because it's so different than all the other aspects. I think that protection plays the most differently of everything else because you're kind of playing against the villain for most of the archetypes where you're playing on the villain's turn, you're reacting to what the villain is doing. And me personally, I love that. I think that's just so much fun. And I get a lot of joy out of playing like that, but it is completely different. And I can totally see why people don't enjoy it like that.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting you said that because I'm actually one of the people who doesn't enjoy taking most of their turn, on the villain phase. I want to do stuff on the hero phase so I can react to the encounter cards and things like that. But protection is such a versatile aspect. It has ways for you to play that way as well, like entirely, or you can just go entirely and more sort of, do things in the villain's phase, mess up their attack and that kind of thing. And it is definitely a divisive aspect. We've got a question from Mitos5 saying, why is protection the coolest aspect? But then a question from the Tiniest Amy, and for some reason it's addressed to you, Nelson. Why is protection the worst aspect? And I do think it is divisive. I think that's a really good point. And we actually have a question here from Olivia Jodoin. Hopefully I'm saying that right. I probably butchered it. I'm so sorry. Why is protection the most fun, versatile, and powerful aspect? Why can't the designers give some love to the other aspects? And I feel like you could have written this question, Nelson. So
yeah, right.
Why is protection the most fun for you?
So kind of like what I was saying, I think that it plays differently. And so whenever I'm playing justice, leadership, and aggression, and I think I would go ahead and like to preface what I have been saying and what I am saying is that I think it's most different in true solo. I think that when you scale up to higher player counts, the other aspects kind of can feel very different than each other. But in true solo, a lot of the times you're building and you have like specific deck builds that you have to create to be successful in Marvel Champions, and a lot of like the aggression, justice, and leadership deck builds can look pretty similar in that sense. Protection is different, and I think that's where a lot of the fun comes for me. And I also am just a huge fan of like build out heroes where something happens and I have to say, hold on, wait a second, and then trigger 12 cards on the table. Like that just like is just super exciting. And protection is the aspect that does that. Protection has all of these upgrades saying whenever you defend and you don't take damage, you get to draw a card, you get to remove threat, you get to ping some damage. Oh, you played a defense event, you also get to throw some damage. And all of these things. And it comes down to how can I optimize my build in order to trigger these upgrades? Because they're not just a given. So it's not when you basic attack, which is, I think, a little bit easier. There are cards that are like when you basic defend, you get a card draw if you look at like the specialized training and those linked cards there. But a lot of the cards are when you defend and take no damage, or whenever you don't take damage. And that creates a puzzle in the game itself, which I think is just really fun to try and solve because it's not the solution is going to be different for every villain and every hero. And so how am I going to use the tools at my disposal in order to solve that puzzle so that I can trigger everything and then make everybody else at the table very mad because I'm taking 5 minutes on the villain's turn to try and trigger everything that's on my table.
Yeah, I think I'm really glad you said that. I have a phrase I use when I play here, mostly, you know, with my partner. When I'm playing protection, and like I've just defended the villain's attack, I'm like, hold up. Many things occur simultaneously. Like everything happens. I trigger this. I trigger this. I trigger this. Oh, my hero has this thing. I trigger that as well. And then like my hand is just doubled, and I've got all these new cards. I'm like, I can play this in response maybe, or something. I don't know. And it's pretty fun. I think it's safe to say maybe you're more of an engine builder than I am, but I think that's fun that we can both appreciate different parts of protection. It wasn't protection, but one of the streams of yours I remember most fondly is when you played my meditation Colossus deck.
Oh,
and
fun. Yeah.
you were like, I'm gonna play, oh, I got meditation, I'll go Ultrigo and play something down onto the board, and I'm thinking, attack, get the villain.
No, only build.
But you did amazing. You overcame some great stuff in that, which I don't know if you could have done if you didn't build up. So I thought it worked well. It's different styles there. I'm going to answer the question a little bit for myself there. Like, what protection is most fun for me? Well, part of it is repurpose, which I think a lot of people who watch my stuff or listen to this probably already know. I love, repurpose. I like getting to use something that is already sort of in existence, whether it's in like the aspect or a hero's kit on the board or something, and kind of give new context to it. I really like that, so I can like turn this upgrade with a couple of counters left on it maybe, and oh, suddenly I have this huge stat boost to attack or forwarding. I think that's really, really fun. But I also really like readying protection, which repurpose also kind of is. I like having options, ready up, do this, ready up, go there. And protection is not just a defensive aspect, as its name might suggest, but it also has the most readying in the game by far, which is really good for any characters with big stats, which is, it's always satisfying, just to crush someone beneath your 3+ attack stat and then do it again and maybe again.
Yep.
So it is versatile. I think different characters approach it in very different ways. If I'm going aggression, you can do like events or different things, but you're bringing damage is the main thing that the aspect is going to offer you. Protection, I would maybe say, is closest to leadership in terms of, you can actually build for, defensive stuff, but, the readying is actually going to give you damage and that kind of thing. So it can reach into different places rather than just I defend.
Yeah. And going back to the question, I can't tell if this is kind of a question that is meant to be a little bit humorous, because when protection first came out, core set protection is rough, right? Like, core set protection is not the epitome of what protection is today. And I do think that they have gotten a lot of love in both, depth of each different archetype as well as diversity of archetypes. And I'm pretty excited to talk about that today, because it's grown, and I think it's probably the aspect. Yeah, it's the aspect that's grown the most since the release of the game.
Yeah. Excluding pool, which didn't exist before, so I think that's grown more, maybe.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. I 110% agree. I love the protection cards in the core set, but they need other stuff to go with them to function, to be at their best. And it's really amazing we've got here. I think we talked about this in the last episode, maybe. But when me and Nelson started this podcast, I was like, protection, meh. My least favorite. Didn't want to, I did want to talk about it, but I didn't want to say nice things about it because I didn't believe it. But the good parts of it that we had, which is honestly most of it, I've come to appreciate more, and it's just got better and better over the last couple of waves. Really, every wave it's gotten better, and it's difficult for me to say it's my favorite aspect. It's very difficult. In fact, the thought of that sends pain physically through me. Good. But a lot of my favorite decks, as I said earlier, are in protection. So it's come a long way. I think it deserved it. And in a weird way, the question we had here said, why can't the designers give some love to the other aspects? I do think it was humorous. But I think they could take a leaf out of Protection's book. What I think Protection has are cards which are very specific, like the readying, and you'd only really want that on characters with good basic stats, ideally, but the ones that have it, they're really good with it. There's a few characters that benefit from being attacked, like Spider-Man Peter Parker, Venom, but Drax and Taunt is really interesting. So Taunt is not something I'm running on Hawkeye very often, but I think,
dare you.
I think if Hawkeye taunts Thanos, I think that's the end of the game. But on other characters, maybe Thanos is a bad example in general, because Infinity Gauntlet is gonna trigger more more often, etc. But, you know, it has tools that on the right character, like the aerial stuff, like Ever Vigilant, super fun card. On an aerial character is really good, other characters not so much. It just has ways to really bring out the best of certain characters in specific ways. Whereas, you know, a good aggression card I could maybe put on, I don't know, 70-80% of heroes.
Yeah, and so are you saying that you think that protection is more hero dependent upon the deck build? So like you can't necessarily take a shell of a protection deck and have it be successful with the majority of heroes, where you can kind of do that with some of the other aspects. Am I understanding that correctly?
I think that is a much more coherent, eloquent phrasing of what I was trying to say. Yeah, the builds are more specific to the hero, and it really kind of feels like the builds are more unique to that hero. And I think that's one of the reasons protection maybe is, you know, loved by its fans, because it's, you know, it really feels like it comes together in a meaningful way for the hero every time you build it for me.
Yeah, that I've never really thought about that, but that makes a lot of sense. It feels very much like it. You have to consider which type of archetype you're going to be running with a hero based on their strengths and their hero cards. And I wonder if that is we've got a couple of questions, and I wonder if that is kind of a prereq or a precursor to some of these questions, like what we got from Single Meeple, who they say, you know, I find protection incredibly hard to get. It just doesn't click for me. It feels so reactive. They spend cards on villain turns to negate effects, but because of that, they don't start with a lot of cards. What are we missing? And so, like, what would you say to Single Meeple and from that question?
That reminds me when I started playing the game and started playing Protection, because I felt basically exactly, you know, the same way. You know, oh, I do some stuff on the villain's turn, or, you know, they have to do their thing, and then I can like counter it or whatever. And then I haven't got much left, and, you know, I got to do all these different things. It didn't feel very satisfying. You know, I play a lot of 2-player. I did back then, although I did play solo more and stuff. But it's, you know, in 2-player, it's like, okay, I've made the other player take less damage, but now they're getting to do all the cool stuff. And I think maybe it's more fun in two-handed in some regards like that. But at the same time, I think definitely from a solo perspective, I think a lot of people fall into this trap, actually, and this might kind of tie into some of the questions we're going to go into later. Our next section, we're going to be going into the Protection Academy, and there's a lot of questions about how to do this, you know, our opinions on what to do there, and so on. And for me, I think an easy trap to fall into is when you're going for maybe more defensive protection in solo, is put in too much defensive stuff. So it's like, okay, my hand is full of ways to defend, and I'll defend, and then what do? I don't have enough cards left at the end, or the cards I've got left at the end are also going to help me defend. Like, I've already done that. So my advice, I think, in generally would be, or sort of my take on sort of what you're missing is, don't go too defensive in solo, or, you know, bring something like Taunt so you can defend more, because you probably don't need that much defense in solo play. And sometimes it's better to use things like Energy Barrier to meet the perfect defense threshold, you know, where if you don't take damage, you get a bonus, rather than events all the time, or as many events. Because, you know, the kind of problem I have a lot still, and I think it's just an inherent problem, is if you want to consistently have defense events, you have to put a lot in. But if you put a lot in, you run the risk of having too many. And so I would just say maybe don't go too heavily into the defense events, and then I think protection generally works pretty well.
Yeah, and protection, the name protection feels like, you know, you need to protect, you need to defend, and we'll talk about the different archetypes and everything. I think that a perfect defense, kind of the intuitive way that if someone is approaching the game would want and expect protection to play, is not a very strong solo build at all.
Yeah.
It's very slow. And if you're playing expert, you have to have time to build up, and it can be very consistent if you can start the game on turn 4 after you've put your armored vest, your energy barriers, your float like waters on the table, and that's where your damage is going to come from. And so while it's, I think it's my favorite way, I think it's a very fun way to play, it's not a very powerful way to play. And so if you're going into playing a perfect defense build, true solo, I would not expect it to be as powerful as some of the other plays. That being said, if you are adding more heroes to the table, you can play protection, and the role that I view protection as in a multi-hero game is they are there to enable the other characters at the table to excel. And if that's not your playstyle, that's not your playstyle, and that's great because you get so many ways to play this game. But like that, I love that, right? If I can play my game so that you don't have to worry about the villain at all, I feel like that's awesome. I very much enjoy that play style, and so it's kind of a protection in the ideal sense of let's protect the table works best in a multiplayer, multi-hero game, and you have to kind of get a little bit creative or expect not to be as powerful if you're playing it as a true solo.
Yeah, I think that's all, pretty true and fair. I think a lot of protection is maybe a bit more reactive, whereas the other aspects are a bit more, you take the initiative first. And, it's okay if not every aspect clicks for you. For some people, it's just not going to happen. But definitely, I think maybe something that helped me, is maybe, take a little step back from protection. Don't play it for a little bit, and then maybe try a build you never tried before. Try a couple cards you haven't touched in a while, because this kind of little segment was supposed to be is protection the best or worst? And I think the downside is if you don't like to do as much defensive stuff, it does have cards that are really good, but you have to get them from a few different packs usually to bring something together. If you don't like to defend and do a lot in the villain phase or react, maybe that in solo isn't the most powerful way to do it, but it's the best because it's so versatile. Just really fun specific options, and if you like to build like an engine or anything, you can trick all those things. So I guess that is kind of my takeaway. How do you feel about that, Nelson?
I agree. I think that is protection the best or worst aspect? The question itself kind of leads to the answer of it's just a polarizing aspect, and we're at the point in the game where if you don't like protection, there's 6,000 other decks that you can play. and so it's a very polarizing aspect. That being said, I think going into this next section, the Protection Academy, is where we can kind of talk about if you don't like that standard perfect defense protection, how would you like to play? And I think let's tee this up with there's a question from Korra, which I believe I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. I would love to hear something about different archetypes. I'm sure there's many more than just perfect defense. And so let's just kind of outline some of those and what those can be. So, Villain, you want to tee that one up for us?
Yeah, I can talk about a couple of archetypes. I mean, perfect defense, I sort of explained it. You don't take any damage from the villain's attack. You get bonuses. It's very obviously defensive. It's perfectly defensive. But
ideally,
it's interesting to try and categorize, all of them individually, because there's a lot of crossover, and you can, hybrid things a little bit. But one of the other ways I touched on a bit is readying protection. And depending on your hero, that could look very different. Drax, for example, I think he comes with leading blow, and he loves leading blow. But you need a big attack stat to make that worthwhile, or you just won't use it. Whereas Ever Vigilant is often part of what people would call aerial protection, but it does just ready up your hero, and you can combine Ever Vigilant with maybe leading blow, or maybe something like What Doesn't Kill Me. All of these things will ready up your hero. So big stats ready up is kind of an umbrella, maybe archetype of protection, and then maybe something more specific would be repurpose, which is it's an event which makes you discard a tech card, then get a stat boost while readying up. So then your other readies will get more value, but you need tech cards in the first place. So readying, perfect defense, and repurpose as kind of a sub archetype of readying are some of the key ones, I think.
Yeah, and I would say that there is starting to become no, not really. I still I think this is the hopium in me. Healing is another sub aspect of what protection can do. I don't think that it's a very effective. I think it's way better to stop the incoming damage than try and heal it. That being said, there are cards out there in protection now, like Med Team and then Render Medical Aid and stuff like that, where you can heal fairly easily. But like Render Medical Aid, and I think this probably works a little bit better in multiplayer, is Med Team, I'm sorry, is you can heal allies. And so if you have a leadership player at the table, you can focus your entire build around preventing allies from leaving the table and allowing those Voltron builds to just take off by healing those allies. So that's another one that's a little bit more niche, I think, and it kind of depends on what heroes are at the table, and maybe it requires a little bit of communication and deck building amongst multiple heroes before you show up at the game. But that's another good one. And then I would say, what do you think about taunts? And I think it kind of is more of a sub aspect, similar to repurpose and reading, to the perfect defense. what do you think about Taunt, where it's a 1-cost card, the villain attacks you, no one else can defend except for your identity, and then you get to draw 3 cards?
It's interesting. I feel like healing in protection and maybe taunt slash bait and switch, which is kind of a less popular but still interesting version of taunt. Maybe they're like tools in your toolkit. Maybe they kind of help your game plan or something, but they're not the kind of definitive part. You know, you can't taunt your way to victory unless you've got retaliate and, you know, electrostatic armor, things that are going to damage the villain back, which could also kind of be a sub archetype or just perfect defense, because you don't need to taunt the villain. You can just run those things and the villain's going to hit you anyway. So there's so many, this is kind of what I was saying earlier, really. You know, there's some very specific ways you can play it and, you know, tailor it to your character. I would say taunt is in a way kind of an archetype. It's a significant part of your deck. Like if you're putting taunt in there, and like 3 copies is a part of the plan, like a big part of your deck plan is going to be around it, but you're going to be trying to use taunt to really achieve something else. Yeah.
So I think taunt is another kind of subsection of that, which can be really fun. But there's a new archetype that came out and started to form in the newest Nightcrawler pack, which is kind of like this minion summoning, defending, taking out enemies during the villain phase. You know, we got Change of Fortune, we got your preview card, which is Come Get Me Bub, which is just, I love that card.
Me too.
And what do you think about this new archetype where you're summoning minions or trying to take minions out to draw cards with Change of Fortune or something like that?
Yeah, I think we've actually got a question about Change of Fortune from Drax with a Sax. Great name again.
Nice.
And they just asked, you know, how do you feel about it? And I have mixed feelings about Change of Fortune, and my thoughts on it haven't changed significantly since like I saw it announced. I think it's exciting and it's really interesting when it works, but to defeat a minion on the villain phase, you know, the villain turn, which is what it's all about, you kind of have to make sure you've got the right encounter card or brought it about through some other means. So you kind of have to step through that hoop. You have to change your fortune in play, but then you need the right way to defeat it at the right time. And for me, a lot of those methods are like slightly unreliable, take a bit of setup, and it is very fun when it triggers. I think it gets better in multiplayer. The more players you have, the more likely things are to line up, and the more free you are to kind of specialize into it as well as other players kind of handle other parts of the game. But once it's all going, like once you've built up the engine and maybe you're against like a minion heavy scenario or something in a lower player counts or whatever, once it's going and when it goes, I think it's very fun and very good, but it can take a while to get there and be a little bit inconsistent in my overall thoughts.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's more fun than it is good, especially in true solo. I've played it in where that's the main focus of the deck. I am summoning minions, I am taking minions out, and we're getting all the benefits that come along with that. And then that typically is lined up with like maybe a status lock on the villain so that I don't have to worry about dealing with the attacks there. I've also played it where it's a nice to have, right? Like if you have like a character with printed retaliate like Black Panther or Captain America, where you can just start to whittle down some of these minions after they attack you. Maybe you're throwing like a pin down on them so you don't have to worry. And it's not the central focus of the deck. It's just another kind of like build out piece where you put it on the table, and when it happens and you're like really happy. That's also, I think, a pretty viable way. But to your point, I think it's way more consistent and way better in multiplayer because you're seeing 4x the number of encounter cards and you don't have to fish for the minions and then try and keep them alive. You're probably going to have multiple different options that you can choose. It's like, oh, that one only has 1 health left. I'm going to retaliate that one, or I'm going to throw my energy barrier ping over on that side and get the card draw there. And so I think it's a really fun archetype. It's not the strongest, but it is kind of another way to play that may maybe a little bit more fun than kind of the standard perfect defense build if people are looking for different ways to play green.
Yeah. I think what's interesting is that it is only a 1-cost card, so you can kind of just throw it in there if you do have some damage, like, you know, like you say, retaliate, and maybe, hey, if it triggers once, you've got your money back. If it triggers twice, you're in profit. You don't have to build heavily into it. I will say most of the builds where I do take it, like I'm thinking, oh, this will work well with it, this will work well with it. Something I've got a whole bunch of upgrades and things I want to play, and playing everything really slows the deck down, and I think that's a bit of a downside. Like, yeah, to get like the most out of it, I think it's a little bit, just a little weird, but I like you say, I do like it. Maybe more fun than it is powerful.
Yeah, and I think that just goes back to it's a better multiplayer. In multiplayer, you have more time to build, right? In true solo, your fires are everywhere, and you have to put out all the fires or else you die. And in multiplayer, there's less fire, there's more people helping, there are more firefighters, right? And so like being able to have that time to build and then become like, this powerful minion killing machine in the villain phase, it's just going to be stronger. So it's very fun solo, kind of situationally good in solo, but I think in true solo I've found if I can trigger it twice, I feel good about it rather than trying to build directly into it. Because one of the things that protection struggles with is minion control. And a lot of and actually I want to use this to transition into the next question from Psycha Nova, which is what is the best combination of hero and protection archetype to have someone try this aspect for the first time? And if we're looking at how heroes are going to work in protection, you want a hero that, if we're thinking about perfect defense, that has a pretty decent defense stat that also has ways to deal massive chunks of damage. Like we've classified this before as like villain damage. And my go-to answer for this question would be Spider-Man. Of course, that Peter Parker, Spider-Man, 3 defense. Whenever they get attacked, you get to draw a card. And so you're kind of getting a little bit of rebate from, the villain initiating an attack against you. And you also have that 3 defense, which is awesome. And then you have your swinging web kicks, which can take out the villain. All of that said, Spider-Man highlights one of the protection weaknesses is if you are playing mutagen formula and you have 7 goblins in front of you, you're going to lose the game, right? Like protection doesn't have the tools that aggression or leadership to some extent have for taking out these minions. And so introducing a card, especially in true solo, that summons the lost condition that I've seen so many times as my protection solo plays has an inherent risk, right? I'm pulling out the thing that typically loses me the game. That's that's tough to do in true solo. But I kind of split the questions into 2. But yeah, I think that Change of Fortune is really fun. Pulling out minions is inherently dangerous. Now you get some benefits if you do have a game plan to answer those, but I think you either need a game plan to answer them or you don't summon them and you let Change of Fortune trigger whenever they are out there.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And I think it's really interesting to talk about Spider-Man. I'm going to go back to Psyche Nova's question. I actually have a similar question from Blue Fulu as well, about, best character to introduce someone, that kind of thing. Spider-Man, I think I'm going to say I would maybe nominate him for newer players, maybe in 2 to 4 player. I'm going to say for solo, if I was introducing someone for the first time with protection, I'm going to go to Captain America, only because he can defend. Then you can discard a card, ready him up, and you can fort or attack. You can kind of do what you need with him as well as defend. And I think that's just, really convenient because it's a little bit like we were saying earlier. Sometimes you just defend, do a bunch of stuff in the villain's turn, and then what do you have left? Well, Captain America can just ready up and kind of do a little bit of anything. So I think that's kind of a nice little, almost a safety net. And then you can experience all the good protecty stuff. And I think with Spider-Man and Captain America, we're leaning toward that 3 defense stat, the kind of more defensive thing. I think if you've got a little bit more experience with the game, you know what? I'm just gonna recommend a random deck build that I want to talk about. We're going off topic. We're off script.
Let's go.
The most fun protection build we've played here in a very long time, possibly ever, is Drax with Taunt and the new Come Get Me Bub. So you're getting tufts, you're getting healing, which Drax loves. You're putting attacks into you, which gets you, counters, or it gets you cards. And then because he's so good at damage, you can take out the minion that Come Get Me Bub did, and it's just ridiculous and amazing. So if you've got some good experience with the game and you're like protection, there's nothing good there, this is the one that I think will sell you on protection. It's so much fun.
Yeah, and I do like that you highlighted a non-perfect defense type strategy, right? Drax doesn't want to defend. He wants to get hit, but he doesn't want to defend. And so if defense is not your cup of tea, try Drax, because Drax has a stupid protection build with Come Get Me Bob. Also, don't sleep on Leading Blow. That one's a very solid card too.
Yep.
For Drax.
I also was just thinking, I think if you're going to buy a hero pack, I'm thinking one of the most solid precons I think we have out there, along with the hero, is maybe Angel, who plays a very aerial protection-y kind of deck where he's kind of readying up and things, but he does have some defensive stuff like aerial intervention. So that's kind of an interesting one.
Yeah, Angel's good. And then I would say not necessarily as good as Spider-Man or Captain America for a brand new player. but Quicksilver also works because he gets that free ready every single phase. So you can defend. He starts out with the 1 defense. You can get it up to like 2 in his kit. And so you're still probably taking a good amount of damage, but you still have the flexibility to thwart or attack. Quicksilver is a little slow in terms of building. And I think the biggest thing for a new player playing Protection is both Captain America and Spider-Man have massive damage cards in their kit. Heroic Strike, Swinging Web Kick, those types of cards I think are invaluable for a true solo Protection player because sometimes you just need 8 damage on the villain, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of goes to Proof Hex's question, which is how do you make a Protection solo game not last 1.5 hours? You play Swinging Web Kick. Like that's how like your Protection is almost a game of how can I delay the villain from killing me until I can draw and play Swinging Web Kick as many times that it takes to kill the villain.
As soon as you started talking about Swinging Web Kick and that, I was thinking, I need to go to this question next.
Yeah. Good. Great minds, right?
Yeah. And I think that brings up an interesting point. Prof Hex also goes on to say, in all seriousness, general tips for deck building and Protection would be nice. And what it made me think about is that, Protection specifically doesn't provide a win condition. It doesn't push you toward damage to win the game. It just basically generally prevents you from taking damage. That is what it's most known for. So if you want to play Protection in solo, you need to think about how am I winning the game? If you have a fairly lower damage character or, small chunks of damage character, maybe Protection isn't perfect there. There's probably a way to make it really good. But if you're starting out with it, at least, it might not be the best place for it. You kind of need maybe some stronger hero cards for damage to push you forward, and then just use Protection to keep you alive and kind of funnel cards for that purpose.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Moving on, our next section is tentatively called at least, Protection Hot Takes, which is more sort of opinion-based stuff a little bit. And our first question there is going to be from Makander, and they say, where do you see Protection stacking up compared to the other 4 aspects in terms of problem-solving tools?
That's kind of interesting. I think what we want to do first is what are problem-solving tools, and kind of have a discussion around defining what those are, because in Marvel Champions, they present you with a lot of problems, right? There's minions, there's side schemes, there's threat on the main scheme, villain damage, villain attack, and then the main problem of all is like damage to the villain for the win condition for 99% of our scenarios. Am I missing any of them? I guess like maybe status conditions could be a problem for heroes and what you're dealing with. I'm trying to like get all of them in my head before I answer the question.
I think the major pillars of problem solving would be sometimes you need to deal damage, sometimes you need to prevent damage coming in, sometimes you need to fall. Those are different tools you have. I mean, there are some attachments which are bad. You need to have the right resource types to get rid of them, but I wouldn't say that's a major factor.
Yeah, I think Protection is excels at preventing the damage coming in, and that is the Protection role, and that's what it does. And so I do think that because chump blocking is so strong in this game, it probably does not compare as well to the other ones, because a lot of the things that Protection is great at, arguably chump blocking is better than what Protection does.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. My initial thought when I saw this question here is that I'm talking about if I'm talking in a general sense about being an all-rounder or providing different tools, I think maybe as an all-rounder, it's maybe second next to leadership in terms of, it does have some forwarding on its allies. It does have things like jump flip and not today, which remove threat, hard to ignore, but they're not, going to compare to leadership or justice. They're in a completely different league. So that's kind of a way to look at it. I will say, the way you say it, about how good chump blocking is, I will say in multiplayer, in most scenarios, newer scenarios, a lot of them do punish chump blocking to some degree. But I would say, if I had to, in terms of, power, choose one aspect maybe not to bring with me in multiplayer, I feel like it is probably going to be Protection, just because, the game is designed for solo play. Every aspect has to be able to deal with damage to some degree. Often that is just chump block, and yeah, it's very efficient.
Yeah. Wait, did you just say if you're going to choose an aspect to not bring to a multiplayer game, it would be Protection?
In terms of power, not fun, I think so.
Oh, come on. Protection's great. What I do like about the protection builds that you can bring to multiplayer tables is you can build these agnostic to the group makeup, and you can really just build a protection build to let other people thrive. And in that sense, you don't necessarily have to know what the other players are playing. I'm sorry, I feel personally attacked when you said that. So I needed to defend. I needed to defend protection. That being said, yeah, yes, if you bring Miss Marvel Justice to a 4-player game, yeah, it's going to be really good. But yeah, no, I agree. I think that it may not be the most powerful, but it can enable some really cool things from the other people at the table.
Yeah, I always love to see protection now in multiplayer. It's not like I don't like to see it. It's just if I was building like a team for power, maybe it wouldn't be at the very top of my list. Putting it very politely now. But
what I'm hearing you say now is you like to see it at the table. You're just not going to bring it to the table. You want someone else to bring the supports.
Okay, I'll put it this way. I'll bring protection, but it'll be a selfish protection.
Oh, fair. Okay, no, I respect that.
Like, I'm going to take the green slot, but sorry, I'm just repurposing and attacking. Good luck with your defense.
Oh yeah. Oh no, I'm not helping you. No, that's funny. I'm just giving you a hard time.
I know.
I find that fun. We do have Deadneck L, who, as protection's variety and versatility, has increased a lot over the life of the game. Do you feel like it has scope creeped into the territory of other aspects, particularly aggression? I understand all aspects need some amount of damage since its win condition is the majority of the case, but it seems to be becoming the premier damage, or it seems to be becoming premier damage builds of the game, or like ready builds are becoming more damage focused. So do you think that protection is becoming better and more versatile because it's taking up landscape that other aspects should have?
That's a really interesting question. And I feel like as the game grows and expands, all the aspects are going to need new stuff, and they're going to borrow little bits here and there from different aspects. There's going to be a little bit of, bleed, maybe is the word, overlap, but I still think they each have a very defined sort of identity. Protection, like I say, does have these very different ways to, you can go defensive or readying, etc. I think those are like the two main ones. But I don't think it has, generally taken away from other aspects to their negative. I will say readying builds, I don't think are like the best damage builds to the game generally. Maybe in solo they're pretty flexible and good, but like definitely multiplayer, I think like Event can do really well. Just having an army of allies with beefed up attack, that's kind of nice. I'm thinking gold balls with attack trading, but you can do all sorts. But readying builds, I do think protection, from having skilled strike and mean swing early on, and maybe nowadays protection's got all these, efficient ways to ready and repurpose and things. Maybe protection maybe took away some of the, and Drax actually, took away from some of aggression's readying builds being maybe quite as good compared to that. But from a general sense, I still think if I want a minion clear in multiplayer, I'm going aggression. If I want to rush in solo player something, I'm going aggression. So it's definitely taken some little bits from that. Like I said, I think it's the second most all-rounded aspect next to leadership. So it has a little bit of stuff, but I still feel like every aspect can shine where it needs to. What I will say nowadays, actually, I think Come Get Me Bub outclasses Looking for Trouble, which is an aggression card. In terms of the minion summoning cards, I think Come Get Me Bub is in its whole different league. I think it's so good. So maybe in that sense, yes, slightly in there, but not to a significant degree.
Yeah, I would agree. Come Get Me Bub very much feels like an aggression card, and I think just printed value, absolutely, it is better than Looking for Trouble. That being said, I think that it is balanced in the sense that aggression can way easier take care of that minion that you do summon than protection can. And so like, I don't want to summon a minion if I'm only getting the value of Looking for Trouble and protection, right? I'm not going to do it, right? So in that sense, it's kind of like balanced in the meta sense of what protection can actually do. And I would say that I would almost expand this question to not just protection. I think protection kind of maybe feels like it is creeping into the other aspects more so because of how different protection is in its playstyle. But I would argue that aggression, justice, and leadership are also doing the same thing. Leadership has go all out. Justice has turn the tide. Like we have like damage dealing ways and things that would be normally seen in other aspects. Like boot camp and aggression feels like a leadership card. So you start to see this bleed, and you're going to see more bleed as the game goes on. And so I don't. I'm happy with the bleed. I don't necessarily think that I would like aggression to stay the way that it is, or protection to stay the way that it is throughout the entire life cycle of the game. I like that we have looking for trouble and come get me bub in these two different aspects, because they play differently, and the way that you handle the problems that they present is different. And so I like the fact that it is bleeding out, but I would say that I don't think that it is just protection doing that. I think all the other aspects are also kind of, starting to push their boundaries into some of the other territories.
Yeah, that's really interesting when you said, looking for trouble, come get me bub is basically, does feel like an aggression card. For me, summoning a minion does feel like aggression, but getting a tough and healing does feel like protection. True. So it's kind of like the initiating effect is maybe a little bit aggression, but the result is maybe a bit protection. Whereas you look at looking for trouble, summoning that minion, minion is everything aggression is, really focused on a lot of the time. But then getting free threat removal, maybe that's justice. So maybe it's okay to have one foot from one aspect, then reaching sort of toward a different aspect, or, vice versa. I think that's totally fine.
Yeah. And like, I don't want to see a card that is dive bomb in protection, right? Like I don't want it to be 4 cost, deal 12 damage to the villain. And it's like that doesn't feel like it fits. But like, I like how you're saying, like, if you do have that, like a foot in the door of each aspect, I think that is probably required for the game and the longevity of the game.
Yeah. I like that question. That was interesting.
Yeah, that was fun.
We have another question here from Dan Odson, and they say, green cards tend to be very good or very bad, in my opinion. Maybe talked about Hulk cards here. What do you think green cards means? No. Protection. Are there any hidden gems or less popular green cards that you really like that you can shout out and give some love to? Putting you on the spot here.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of green cards that fit really well in specific decks, and so I just played, and I've done a deck factory before on like Hard Knocks with Gambit, where Hard Knocks is a 2-cost card that deals 4 damage, and if you defeat an enemy, you get a tough status card. And Gambit has the ability to modify that damage to exactly what you need in order to defeat that probably minion, right? So if you have like a 6 health minion, you can spend those 2 charge counters, and so to take them out, get the tough status card, and you get a free villain activation against Gambit at that point. And I think that a lot of these cards, the hidden gems, are going to be more hero specific hidden gems, and not just like this card is amazing, you should play it in every single one of your decks.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? That's
totally fair. I'm going to pivot this to maybe not a hidden gem, but maybe a forgotten gem from yesteryear, from times gone by, from back in the old days. And that is going to be Muster Courage, which is a card that is better on Expert because the villain stage is sort of relative to the effect you get. So it's Avenger only. So again, all the X-Men, mutant stuff, no one's playing Avengers as much. I still like to play them, but And it gives up to X for any characters a tough status card to maximum 3, blah, 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 where X is equal to the villain stage numbers. So on Expert, most villains start on stage 2. So this card gives 2 tough status cards. This is one of my favorite cards to defend the table because I don't want to exhaust and do stuff in the villain phase. But Muster Courage lets me put out toughs in the hero phase. And then, we've got 2 to 3 toughs on the table for this one card, which I really, really enjoy. So if you want to play multiplayer protection especially, though you can make it work in solo, but multiplayer especially, and you want to make sure people aren't getting defeated, but you don't want to do everything in the villain phase, Muster Courage on Expert mode is going to be the card to let you do that.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's one that I have definitely forgotten about. I do like Muster Courage. One of the newer ones that I think kind of got re-highlighted when I was playing with Nightcrawler is Angel's Airy, where every time you defend, you add a counter, and then as an alter ego action, you can heal the amount of counters that are on that card. And with protection, there's, the goal is to not, I guess the goal for any hero is to not die, but like the goal of protection is to not take a lot of damage, but sometimes that will slip through. There is kind of a defined playstyle, which I hope that we do get a little bit more cards in the future. Maybe we'll talk about this here in a second, but of like, if your hit points are at or above your starting health, like we have a couple of cards that play into that archetype or role there. like Dauntless, right? Like you get to retaliate if your health is at or above your starting hit points. And so if a damage does slip through, and maybe like you perfectly defended the villain attack, but there's that pesky minion that hits you for 1, and now it's like, oh well, now Dauntless doesn't work. You do have, the safety net that is Angel's Airy, and a lot of the times you're defending a lot with when you're playing protection, and so that is been one that I think is really good, and really, especially with Nightcrawler, who defends even more than a lot. So
I like that a lot. That's really interesting. I need to play that card more. And I like that Nightcrawler has that, the form change, I think. So
yeah.
That helps him get down to heal with it. So that's really cool. Good shout.
The next section that we have, and our final section where we're talking about protection here on the podcast, is kind of the future of protection. We've done this with the other aspects. Where do we want to see the protection aspect go, and what are some of the things that we would like to see it grow into? And I wanted to bring this and also kind of tie in another question that we had from Matthew, which is like, what is your overall opinion of allies for protection? They think that a lot of the allies are overcosted much of the time, maybe Rogue being the exception. 4-cost allies are really hard to sell, especially if you've depleted your hand during the villain phase. You don't have the money to pay for these allies. And I would say that one of the things that I would like to see in protection is more ally support, where we have seen, boot camp and aggression, but we have med team in protection, which can heal allies. And so if we can get, allies that the focus is using your hero to protect the allies that you put onto the table, and let the allies kind of do a lot of the damage and thwarting, and almost like a leadership-esque ally build in protection, I think that could be a really fun way to show some love to protection, or kind of grow it out a little bit more. Because I kind of agree, there's very few 4-cost allies outside of very specific deck builds that I'm running in protection, because most of the time I just don't have the money to pay for them.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. When I think about the 4-cost allies in protection, there are a couple that are really good, but some of them, like Iron Fist, who was like a staple in almost every protection deck once upon a time, I feel like kind of fallen off a bit because of Steady and Stalwart. Multiple Man I actually really like, but asking for free deck spaces in a 2024 deck when there's so many good cards is really difficult. And like you say, I think we could expand on that. We got attack training and mission training and aggression and justice respectively to let us start upgrading allies a bit more. Aggression also has some other stuff. Protection does have, I think it's called protective training, but it's less popular, it's less versatile. It can be interesting. I don't think it's a bad card by any means, but I definitely feel like of all the aspects, protection has the least kind of meaningful play with its allies. A lot of them have toughs, so you can, chump block, but it survived. It wasn't actually a chump block. There's a lot more they could do off that, so I think that's a really good point. I agree.
I like the idea of using allies for non-chump blocking allies, to let them be out there and thwart. And we've seen a little bit of this with Overkill or Gene Pool de-incentivizing the chump block. And so I think that would be just a really exciting way to kind of show some ally support in protection. We do have a question from Taco, which is kind of very similar to this, which, they're asking, how would you feel about a protection archetype focused around healing other heroes or allies? Do you think it would be a good idea? Is there room for that?
Yeah, I think you touched on healing a little bit earlier when we were talking about archetypes. There's quite a bit of healing in protection right now, but nothing that really ties it together in a really meaningful way in general. So I think some kind of maybe hone technique style, not exactly, but some kind of card which you have it on the board. Now your healing is a little bit more valuable in some capacity or some way or some interaction. I absolutely think there's room for that. I think we have all the foundations laid, and we just need a little something to give it a bit more meaning, to tie it all together. And I think that'd be perfect. I think people would like that significantly.
Yeah. I mean, in games, RPGs, and any board game, healing is what I very much enjoy. I like playing the tank and then healing up people and all of that. And so I've tried to run healing. I had a Wasp deck that works on healing. It's not the greatest deck, but it's fun.
Way to set it.
Yeah, it's fun. It's great at 4-player, protects the table, and it has some healing, but really it's protecting the table. And if we can get more ways to heal, I think that is just a very natural progression for protection. And we do have second wind. We have healing cards. I just don't think that there is enough incentive to heal versus preventing the damage in the first place.
Yeah. Here's a random idea off the top of my head as you were talking about this. And I also want to say, especially when I was a teenager, like growing up, I played a lot of MMOs, online games. I loved playing healer in all of those. I really enjoy healing, and I think you can get a lot of fun out of, managing people's health that way and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But one way to incentivize it that just came to my mind is that what if there was like some kind of upgrade of something that said, after you hit another character, it gets +1 to its next basic attack or 4 or something. Like just a little nudge that powers them up. They got their energy back and they're healed up and something like that.
That would be really cool. And you could almost do like the perfect heal, like cards like Dauntless or Fighting Fit, like things that have better abilities. You could do that as like a total health pool among the table, right? So,
that made me have like another thought. I think a less bookkeepy way to do it is it could be no character is missing more than X health. You can or hero identity. That could be a way to do it, and it encourages you to like heal everyone up. So interesting. And we all like Monica Chang making surveillance team better. What if we had another ally or upgrade or something that made Second Wind better, because that's a big healing card, but it's not that efficient per cost. So that card specifically could use a little boost, and that could be a fun way to bring that in too. So, I mean, I guess the point here is I've got so many ideas just coming to mind that it really feels like we need it, and it's hopefully going to happen. I would like it.
Yeah, we have the Oloops. I think I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. What are some protection cards you like to see in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.? And, you bring up Monica Chang, who is, a S.H.I.E.L.D.-based archetype build in Justice. We have Med Team, which is the S.H.I.E.L.D. card in Protection. I think if you do a Monica Chang parallel in Protection, Med Team gets, borderline broken at that point. But S.H.I.E.L.D. archetype and how those cards have historically worked, how would you like to see that apply to Protection?
That's very interesting. The way we talk about Monica Chang here, and like, that could, Med Team maybe doesn't need any help, but what if there's an ally? What if there was a S.H.I.E.L.D. ally that was a little bit weak, but if you use Med Team on it, it gets a bonus, kind of like what I was saying for healing gets a bonus. So, rather than something to boost up Med Team, we could introduce something that Med Team could really combo with specifically. So these questions tied together. Well, I didn't plan that when I started talking about Monica Chang. But I kind of like that. I think what I like in Justice for Protection, one of my favorite cards in the game, actually, Global Logistics. I like that kind of control, but I also like how that and Homeland Intervention, they make you exhaust other shield cards to get a bonus. So maybe Protection could have something like that, or maybe Protection, because it actually has the shield ally Black Widow, who also messes with encounter cards. Maybe we can see something more in that regard or something, what? And why not? Why don't we make, because Med Team has healing on it, why don't we make the shield theme of Protection, if they add new cards for it, be healing? Maybe that could be fun to really lean into that.
Yeah, that'd be cool. When you were saying that an ally where you use Med Team on it, now we're just in like this awesome speculation territory, which is maybe my favorite part of this podcast, is just like bouncing ideas. But I think it'd be really cool if you had a upgrade or something that, as a response, after you heal a character to full hit points or something along those lines, where that could be an ally, that could be a hero, and like after you heal a character to no damage or no sustained damage, respond with, I don't know what that response is, but that could also be another way to incentivize the healing. I think that could get a little strong with healing allies, so maybe you have some balance there. But that's cool. I do like the idea of using shield as healing and potentially even more encounter card mitigation. We've seen that mainly in Justice at this point, but like you said, we have Black Widow and Protection. I always thought that encounter deck manipulation feels a little bit more protection-y to me, in the sense of like I'm messing with the villain rather than kind of thwarting. But
yeah, there's so many possibilities. When you're like saying, "Oh, heal a character to full health," my instant thought was, "And ready them."
That'd be cool.
Because that brings consequential damage onto allies. Maybe not too powerful allies, and then I don't know. There's so many cool things you could do there. And then like encounter card manipulation. We do have, I think, from the core set. Somehow the name is escaping me, but where if there's a treachery card, you can turn it into attack against you instead. Maybe Shield could do something.
No. Yeah.
Get behind me, I think.
Yeah.
We played this game before, guys.
It's a great card. You should totally use it. We use it all the time. You can tell.
Yeah. So anyway, but we could do something very simple like that. Maybe shield could turn one type of effect from an encounter card into another. Maybe like if the villain schemes, it attacks instead with -2 attack. Something beneficial like that. Switch
That
it
would
around.
be cool. Yeah, that'd be really interesting. Okay, no, I really like this. I really like this train that you started. Effectively turning scheme into attacks, and that type, and that could honestly, I don't know, that's really fun.
We should just...
Yeah, like I'm trying to figure out how. Nah, it's not my job to balance it. If you basically, if there was a shield type card where when the villain schemes, it attacks instead.
Yeah,
like that feels shieldy to me. Be interesting to see how they would balance that for true solo, but like that'd be pretty cool.
it could have like some restriction. Maybe you have to be order go first. It could be like armor up for Colossus, but a little bit more.
Oh, okay.
But it could be anything. You know what I think we should do, Nelson? I think me and you should just design our own expansion for this game.
Wildly unbalanced, but a ton of fun.
I'll balance it. You can come up with some of the ideas.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Nice. So you want to transition into what is coming up next on our channels and what we're doing?
Yeah, let's talk about that. What am I doing next on my channel? That's a great question. Well, something I've just celebrated on my channel is actually I've managed to somehow hit 3,000 subscribers. So
let's go. Congrats.
That's very exciting. Thank you. I didn't know that was ever going to happen, but it has. So I'm probably going to do a little bit of celebratory stuff on that. I've never actually celebrated any subscriber amount ever before. I've just kind of like, I should respond to that, but I got this other video I want to do, and then like the moment had passed. But I think I've had a giveaway I've been planning to do for a little while of like some X-Force promos and a couple of other bits. So I'm just going to advertise that. Keep your eyes peeled. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. Other than that, though, I'm just going to continue doing a couple of videos on villain stuff. I've got my Nightcrawler review coming up, and maybe some more hero focused stuff in the future. Really cool. got some things in the works that I'll keep close to my chest. What about you, Nelson?
I am starting as a recording. By the time this is out, I've already started it. But the Feast of Hemlock Vale, the Arkham Horror expansion, I'm starting that, so I'm pretty excited to get back into Arkham Horror, and then I'm just eagerly awaiting the Magneto Hero Pack here in about a month.
Yeah, that's going to be fun. But yeah, I think that about does it for this week. I really enjoyed Protection. Why is it so good, Nelson? What happened?
It's great. It's perfect. Perfect defense. It's protection.
Well, anyway, Protection is very, very good, and this kind of concludes our series of aspect looks in the podcast, because we did multi-aspect and pool first, naturally, and then we did the actual main 4 aspects. Yeah. So we're gonna have some new topics going forward. If we can cook something up special for you guys, we're gonna do it. But I think for the first time, we might open up what the next topic is in a poll, so you guys can vote. It'll probably be done on YouTube through my channel. I might try and sweet talk Nelson into sharing it, but look out for the community sort of post section on YouTube. I'm sure I'll link to it on my Discord and things as well. It'll be out there, and yeah, let us know what you guys want to hear about. In fact, if you want to drop a comment or an email, our email is shadowofthecast@gmail.com. What topics are you interested in us talking about? Let us know.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm eager to vote in that poll as well. So
wait, we can vote
and vote. So don't worry. But yeah, this was a fantastic episode. I always enjoy talking about this game with you. And I'm excited for the next episode, and I'm also excited to know what that is.
Yeah, so stay tuned for that, and thanks for listening, guys. See you next time.
See you.
Bye.